Jiminy Cricket, it's a block. Alright guys, the moment that a lot of you have been waiting for, including myself. I finally have accumulated enough parts and pieces and a good enough game plan together to where I could do a full disclosure video about the new engine build for my race truck, the Fossil. So without any further ado, let's jump into this stuff. We're going to start from the top to the bottom. I'll talk about everything, why I've chose the pieces that I've chosen, and the plan moving forward. So I'd say it's probably no surprise to you guys that I was sticking with a 12 valve head. In my previous videos, I had told you guys that I actually have a complete spare head that is nearly identical to the one that I'd been running on the truck. So that is what we're going to start with. I am not 100% sure yet if I'm going to run this exact cylinder head or if I'm going to put some new valves, some new springs in my old head and start off with that. The reason why is because this head, although it is set up with the big Hamilton valves, it's machined for the Shide intake runner, it's already been decked, it's for the most part ready to go. It actually already has the double valve springs in it that I was knowing that I was going to be needing. My last head just had single valve springs and I was really running too much boost and too much RPM for those. But you can see here that this head is not ported. This was something that I planned on getting CNC ported, and then it would be a really nice piece at that point. But I am not sure yet if I want to invest the money in porting this head or fixing the head that I have. And at the end of the video, I'll kind of go over my thought process on all of this stuff. But regardless, no matter what, we're essentially going to be running the same cylinder head that we had on the truck before. So keeping that part of the build nice and consistent, no big changes there. So the next thing we need to talk about is piston choice. So the pistons are going to be the first thing that is getting changed up on the build from my old setup versus this one. Right off the bat, you can see that these are a really wide bowl piston, and I know that some of you guys thought that these were a common rail bowl, wide bowl common rail, but they're actually not. These are diamond pistons that come from Shide Diesel, and this is Shide's specific bowl design. This is what they like to run, and since I'm running their injectors, their pump, I wanted to run whatever they believed the best piston design to be, and this is what they have come up with. Aside from it being a billet piston, you can see that it is coated. My last pistons had a coating on them as well, but the big difference about this piston is the bowl. Just the bowl being a lot wider, and it's actually more shallow than the Wiseco pistons that I had on it before. But the compression ratio is still somewhere around the same. We don't know exactly what the Wiseco pistons compression ratio was because they came with a dome center and we machined those flat. So we really, without spending a bunch of money to figure it out, we were just kind of guessing that those were around 14.8 to 1. And these pistons here are 15 to 1. So this is similar enough to what we had before. I did want to go changing it up a bunch. I wanted to keep the compression a little bit low, but I'm not a big fan of the super low compression stuff in the mechanical motors for drag racing. It makes it a lot harder to spool the turbo with, so wanted to stick with something similar to what we have, but get the design that was going to make the most power. And in a common rail application, the wide bowl pistons in a limited air application will make more power than the smaller bowl will. So hopefully these pistons alone will make a little bit more power than the old piston setup. And then we've also got total seal rings, which I also got from Kent over at Shide. My old setup had some Z-gap second rings. These are supposed to be a gapless second ring as well. They're a chromoly top ring, or a chrome top ring, I should say. This similar setup to what I ran before, and this is what they run in the dragster at 3,000 plus horsepower. So I know that my little 1,500 horsepower goal, this will work just fine, just like it did before. So now on to the item that caused all of this headache to start with. It wasn't really the rod's fault, but these rods here, as you can see, These are Carrillo rods. Now, I know if you guys have been around the diesel thing for a long time, that Carrillo rods can have a bad rap. And really, the problem back in the day with the Carrillo rods were the wrist pin bushings. Well, Freedom Racing Engines has actually remachined these rods with their own bushings in them. Similar, Wagler does the same thing, and that is supposed to really be the fix with the Carrillo rods. The one thing I really like about a Carrillo rod is they have a really nice locking cap design. They're a really high quality rod, and there are Carrillo rods in 4,000 horsepower Hemi cars. Carrillo definitely does know what they're doing. The biggest problem with them was always just the bushings with them. I also got these for a really good deal from my good buddy JP. So it was one of those things where I couldn't pass up the deal on them. Had brand new bushings from Freedom anyways. So for a 1,500 horsepower goal, and honestly, you could make 2,000 plus on these and I wouldn't be worried about it. But for what I'm doing with them and the price that I got them at, I am more than confident in these rods. All right, so now that we've talked about some of the more minor details, I guess you should say, let's get into what you guys are all really wanting to know about, which is going to be the block and the crank setup, because that's really going to dictate what everything is and what we're trying to accomplish with that. So let's go check out this new block. So for all of you that guessed 6.7 block, you are correct. Where nobody was correct on is exactly what I was going to do with the bore and stroke and exactly what this block is. So let's talk about it. So this here is actually a Hamilton aftermarket block. It is what they call a comp block. And what that means is that this is a water block. So you can run water throughout the block and the head, like a traditional engine would be. But it is thicker casted up here towards the top of the cylinders. So basically think almost like a deck plate without having the 1-inch thicker extra deck plate that you have to have the longer rods for and such. But still not as strong as a deck plate motor for sure. But more of that concept to where it has more thicker casted material in the top of the block here. Along with that thicker casting, this block is finished out in actually a 5.9 bore. So when Hamilton was offering these blocks, unfortunately they no longer do, but when they were selling these were casted in 5.9 bore, and then you could finish them out to whatever you wanted. Well, this one has been finished out in 20 over 5.9. So what that does is makes this cylinder walls even stronger. So not only do we have the Siamese cylinders of the 6.7, we have a thicker casting at the top, similar to trying to imitate a deck plate, and we have a 5.9 bore. So this block right here is tremendously stronger than a factory 5.9 block would be, even if it is filled like my old one was. These blocks here, depending on who you talk to, people that actually have a lot of experience with these blocks, like Freedom Racing Engines, they rate these blocks at 1,800 horsepower in a high torque common rail application. So I have no fear that this block will do everything I need it to do and then leave some on the table. This block has already been completely machined. It was actually machined quite some time ago, but Freedom Racing Engines actually did everything on this block. They did all the final machine work, the fire ringing of it. It has all of the cam bearings throughout, just like my last block. And this one actually does have a girdle as well, with 14 millimeter main studs and 14 millimeter head studs. So this should be a really, really stout engine setup. Should be a block that I really don't have to worry about. The cool thing about this block is that, unlike my filled block, you can now run water in it. But there's a catch. It is not as easy on a 12 valve as just bolting the head onto this thing and then being able to run water in it. The 12 valve factory heads, like what I run, the exhaust runners actually expose the water jackets on every cylinder right here, all the way to the back, and the back one being the worst, being the most exposed. this is what's really been delaying me on telling you guys about this setup, because I've had this stuff for a while now. And I still don't have a perfect square cut answer of what we're going to do here, but we're going to do one of two things, and either one of these things, it's going to work no matter what. Because these water ports are exposed, then the first thing you would think is, well, that sucks, you can't run water in the block. And maybe so. Well, I've reached out to several people who have done this before I have done this. The most helpful being Cutter Up Rob. He's out of Canada. He's got a really nice YouTube channel. I would definitely recommend checking his stuff out if you're into engine stuff. He has done several 12 valves on 6.7 engines, but he's always used Hamilton heads, it sounds like. And on a Hamilton head, they have a really thick material all the way across their exhaust runner side. It's not cut out like the 12 valve heads are, and so this isn't a problem. You can stick a Hamilton head on it, bolt it on, and go. That would probably be the easiest fix for that. There's a couple reasons why we're not going to do that. Number one is cost. I already have good heads. They don't need a lot of money put into them, and I want to stick with what I have. And then the other being that you can no longer purchase a brand new Hamilton head, so you have to find one used. You have to find somebody that has a new one. In the event that you ever hurt one, you're playing that game all over again. And you know, it's the same deal with this block, don't get me wrong, no doubt. But when it comes to the head stuff, I just really don't want to mess around with discontinued stuff. And then if you go to a Warhead, that comes with its whole set of problems, custom valves, larger, or longer, I should say, push rods and head studs, because the head is actually thicker. And then you can't do a 5.9 bore on those because of the larger valves. So for me personally, the Hamilton deal is out. I want to stick with my stock head. So after talking with a few people, I'm fine with just running basically the block dry. And I even considered filling the block and just running water in the head, just like my old setup. But here's the problem with that. If you fill the block after your machine work is done, then you will have to go and have your cylinders rehoned, sometimes even rebored slightly, because when you fill a block, the cylinders move. Now, I know these are Siamese cylinders. It's a thicker casted material. You would think that it wouldn't move, but it will. So if I went and had the block filled, now the pistons that I already have could be problematic, because if we have to go in here and open the bore up slightly, even if it's just a couple thousandths, now I have too much piston to wall clearance. That's going to cause issues. The engine's not going to live as long. So filling the block is not on the table. So now we're down to either running the block dry or figuring out how to run water in the block. Like I said, I'm totally fine with running the block dry. I had a filled block before, and a dry block is actually easier to cool off than a filled block is, because the filler heat soaks. It's really hard to get it cooled down between rounds. And a dry block, you can actually run a blower through between rounds and cool it down pretty quickly. But I would like to try to run water in this. We ran water in JP's truck with his engine, which is now in Newman's truck, the blue first gen. And it was really easy, super low maintenance between rounds. And every time that engine was apart, we were told that it looked amazing. And so I'm going to try to run water in this. And like I said, I talked to Cutter Up Rob. He has a really good idea on how to do it. I don't want to spoil his video. He's actually going to be posting his own video, specifically how he did it. And the way he did it, I could actually do it like this on this block too. But I want to show you guys my way that I kind of came up with to do it, and see what you guys think, and kind of explain why I'm thinking about doing it this way. So this is my old 5.9 copper head gasket that I was running on my last engine, which was a filled block. As you can see, everything lines up as far as the oiling holes, all of the head bolts, the lifter bores, whatever you want to call them. This would work perfectly fine on this engine, especially with it already being a 5.9 bore. So, what the reason of the copper head gasket is because on a filled block, obviously if you're trying to run water in the head, then you need to be able to separate the water from the head and the block. And as you can see, there are no cutouts anywhere in the copper gasket for water. So, my plan is to take this copper head gasket, and anytime you do a copper head gasket, you always want to put a little bit of that copper silicone on it, because copper head gaskets aren't the best about sealing up on their own, but once you got them sealed up, they do not leak. I never had any water problem out of my last setup at all. So what I am thinking about trying is to do this copper head gasket, obviously a new one, not this one, and once the head is torqued down, there will now be separation between water jackets of the head and water jackets in the block. And so what I would like to try to do at that point is to basically feed water into the head from over here, just like I did before, and then return it out the back side of the head, just like I did on my last setup. And then also feed water into the block here, like the lower radiator hose area, and separately, so basically have a line that Y's off into the head, into the block, and then same on the return side, and use either the back freeze plug or one of these side freeze plugs back here to return water out of it. So essentially what that would allow us to do is that would allow us to cover up these water jackets that are slightly exposed with the head torqued down. You can see in the soot here where the head shape is. There's still enough of the water jacket closed that I think with the rigidity of this head gasket, it'll seal it off tight enough to where we won't have any problems. I'm also not running a mechanical water pump. I run an electric water pump, so water pressure is always very low and it's always consistent, so it's not like it's going to create a bunch of water pressure at high RPM and blow the water out of between the gasket and cause me to crash or anything crazy like that. So I think that's the plan. Now, this is the good thing about this plan, is if we put this engine in the truck, we get it running, and my idea doesn't work, and it is leaking some water out of it between the block and the head, all I have to do is drain the water out of the block, cap off my Y's and the lines, and boom, I'm ready to go to the track, just run this as a dry block. So the risk versus reward here, the risk is very low, the reward possibility is very high, so I think that is the direction that I plan on going with it. So that's pretty much full disclosure on the block, the pistons, the rods. So now let's talk about the crank, because that's going to kind of finish out this the meat and potatoes of this engine. With the theme of staying 5.9, we are also staying 5.9 crank. So this is essentially a glorified 5.9 engine. This is a 5.9 crank, actually out of a common rail, so I will have to change the straight cut gear to the helical cut gear, which isn't that big of a deal. This one has already been to the machine shop, already been polished, checked, ready to go in. Now, you may ask why I don't switch everything over to the straight cut gears, and really that is a pretty decent expense to do that. You need to change the oil pump. I'm not saying we're not going to change the oil pump, but you need an oil pump, you need a cam gear, you need a pump gear, and then for my power steering delete, I would need to figure out a gear setup on that, and that's kind of one of the snags there, is because you can't just run a Cummins straight cut power steering pump. They didn't make one of those, so there's too many issues out there with aftermarket gear stuff. I want to stay away from that. And I talked to Jared at Shide, Jared Jones, who drives the Shide Dragster. He's my contact. He's usually my first contact when it comes to this 12-valve stuff. And he told me that you don't need straight cut gears until you're going over, 5,800, 6,000 RPM on a regular basis and 2,000 plus horsepower. So we're not going to operate within those limits. So it's cheaper, quicker, and easier to stay with the helical cut stuff. Now, I also know that you guys are probably wondering why I am staying completely 5'9" on this thing. And so let's talk about that. Let's talk about why I'm staying with what I'm staying with and kind of how I ended up with these parts that I have. So I think I should preface the reasoning behind all this by saying that the goal in rebuilding this engine was two things. And one, to try to keep it as cheap as possible. I obviously wasn't expecting to have an engine failure. Engine failures are obviously really pricey. So I didn't want to have to sit out for 2 years to save up enough money to build something that was, maybe a little bit better than what I have. I wanted to get back to the racetrack, and I was really happy with where I was heading with the combination of parts that I had. The 5.9 was doing great. It was spooling good. We had been some 590s. We, knew the truck had 570 potential in it 2 years ago, and I was starting to learn enough about my setup and my combination to get back on track to head deeper into the fives. So my biggest fear is taking something that was working or on track of working and then changing all the parts with it that are going to completely change the way that it acts. I mean, this is already a big enough change for me just with the small parts that we are changing, that I don't want to be completely back to ground zero, back to 2021 again, to where we're trying to relearn the whole truck all over. That's why the injectors are staying the same, the pump's staying the same, we're staying mechanical, and I wanted to be able to keep this thing 5.9 so I could pick up where I left off. Now, will that ultimately limit me down the road? Maybe so. But we got to get down the road before we can worry about down the road. The other thing is, with this being a budget deal, is I had some good friends of mine step up and really help me out big time on these parts. JP made me a super good deal on these rods that I needed. A good friend of mine, Tim Wright, who I'm actually hoping to have on the channel here because he's a wealth of knowledge when it comes to diesel stuff. He's been doing it a long time. He's a little older than I am, and I think it'd be interesting to hear the story about how him and I kind of got hooked up and all the racing that we did together. He had this block. He had it machined, he had it ready to go, and he wanted to help me out. He wanted to help me get the truck back up and going. And Tim was originally the guy that helped me build the engine the first time. He's going to help me build the new engine. So if it wasn't for these people that are in my corner that are really helping me out, I might be going a little bit different direction with it, but it would probably be a 2-year deal, to be honest with you. And I don't want to wait 2 years. I want to get back out to the track and see where we can pick up where we left off. Now, I also know how much that free stuff really cost. Or whatever, really good deals on stuff. You got to be careful because you can't put together junk just because it's cheap. So if this was some stuff that I didn't believe in, I wouldn't do it. I would just bite the bullet and wait. But I know that that block is more than capable of doing what I need it to do. I know that these rods are more than capable of doing what I need them to do. I know that I have 2 options for heads that are going to get me back up and going pretty cheap. My biggest expense in this thing so far, to be honest with you guys, is the custom pistons. Aside from that, the big question mark looming over right now is if the cam is good and if the tappets are good. If those are good, I'm going to be able to get back up and going pretty quickly. The other big expense that I need to spend is with when you do a 6.7 block and you're keeping it P-pump, you have to either do a lot of work to make a stock front cover fit, and you can do it. You got to drill and tap some holes. You got to grind some stuff on the block. I'm not really interested in doing all that. I want something that is going to be perfect and true, so I am going to have to get a billet timing case for this, so that's going to cost a little bit of money too. But for the most part, a lot of the expense, I have it all right here. It's already been paid for, so I'm going to be able to get back up and going quicker with this setup. Now, I'll be honest, the Pistons were really hard for me to make a decision on what I wanted to do. The piston is a make or break deal on a diesel engine. Really on any engine, but on a diesel it's a big deal. You know, you're talking about changing compression ratio, changing bowl design. Even if you just manipulate that stuff the slightest, you're kind of gambling on how it's going to react. So I thought long and hard about ordering another set of Wiseco pistons and having them machined exactly the way that they were in my old engine. And the reason that I decided not to do that is because I just didn't believe that that bowl design that I had was optimal. I believe that Scheid has been doing this mechanical stuff longer than anybody, and I think that they know more than anybody when it comes to making horsepower with these 12 valve engines. And so they wouldn't be running that bowl design if that wasn't the best design that was going to make the most power. This is my opinion on it. So that's the one area that to me it was worth taking the risk on to get the latest and greatest, if you'll say, piston design. The other area that like I said, I'm up in the air on what to do about the cylinder head is, it obviously, guys, makes the most sense for me to just have this cylinder head right here ported, especially if I can get it CNC ported, because that's going to be a pretty nice cylinder head at that point. It's already done, the machine work's done, it's got the right valve springs in it, I don't have to buy valves, but this is where me wanting to learn my combo is stepping in and saying, hey, if you just put your other head back together, if you just fix it, put double valve springs in it, and put that on the engine to start with, then essentially the only thing you've changed is the piston design. And it would be really cool to see what just a piston design would change. See how it changes the way the truck starts, the way that the truck spools, the way the truck runs. I think that that would be super educational and would really be something that would, knowledge is power. So I think that it would give me knowledge that would maybe help me down the road continue to go faster. So I'm really leaning towards fixing that head, doing that. And then once we feel like the head is a limitation, because that head I just hand ported years ago, I did a really good job on it, I think. I kept everything super consistent and I spent a lot of time on it. But there's nothing like a CNC program. So I think that for the interest of science and learning your program, it would be awesome to just put it back together with the head that was on it. We're keeping 5.9 bore, we're keeping 5.9 crank, we're keeping all that stuff the same. So just seeing what the piston change would do would be really cool for not only me, but for you guys too. That would be something that we could all learn from. So I'm sorry if you guys are a little disappointed in the engine combo. If you guys thought that I was going to be putting together some crazy 2,000 plus horsepower monster, not saying that I wouldn't love to do that, but at the same time, I've seen guys go way out in left field trying to run, this and that, and really trying to change the combo up. Like I told you, I'm happy with where we're heading with it, and I want to come back out swinging with this thing. So that's all I got for this one, guys. We're going to do every aspect of this engine build is going to be filmed. We're going to talk about every single thing, talk about why I do it, where I set the ring gaps at, the bearings, all that stuff, all the people that I get information from. So definitely stick around for this series this winter. I'm hoping that'll be a good one for you guys. If you're new here, click the like button, click that subscribe button, and we'll catch you on the next one. So I almost forgot the giveaway. So because nobody actually guessed really any closer than any one other person, I didn't think it was right for me to just pick somebody to give this to. So this is what we're going to do. Next Thursday, so this is coming out Sunday, Thursday the 21st, I'm going to go live at 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, and we're going to do a raffle of all the people that entered this, and the winner of the raffle is going to win the 2,000 subscriber giveaway. So that's all I got. Thanks for watching, guys. See you soon.